Welcome to this video focused on titles. It's Title Talk, using YouTube to explore the language and syntax of academic titles. So this title right here demonstrates one of the key features of a quality academic title. They don't all have colons, but you want to become fluent in the art of using colons in the creation of your academic titles. Colons are your very good friends. The second main point that I want to make, I'm going to return to that one a little bit. There's really only 2 points to this video. That's the first one. Colons are your very good friends. So how do you use colons? The second one is academic writing, like a literary analysis, for example, or a research paper in the sciences. That's a genre. It's a genre of literature. And so if you're going to understand the rules of that genre of literature, you got to read some of it. So the second thing I'm going to do towards the second half of this video is I'm going to present to you a bunch of academic titles. They're all in blue, and I want to maybe just talk about how they work a little bit. First, colons. Colons are your very good friends. Colons give you an opportunity for tonal contrast, which the title is the first thing that your professor, your friend, the jury of your peers, whoever's going to read your paper, the title should be the product of a lot of very careful thought. The title also might not be the very last thing that you create. It's very possible, let's say you're an IB student right now and you're working on your HL essay. You've got a line of inquiry, you've got a set of questions that you're asking, you have a work that you're going to focus on, you have a title, eventually you have a thesis. You might come up with your title first, before your thesis. Or you might have some questions, say, does this feel like a good title? Sometimes a title can actually draw you into creating a paper. So it's never too early to think about titles and papers, especially if it's going to be a good title. So good titles frequently use a colon, and the colon allows you to have tonal contrast, something that draws the reader into your paper, something that shows that you are not going to be boring, that your writing is going to be academic, informative, it's going to be a compelling argument, it's going to be sophisticated, but it's not going to be just dry, like you actually care about what you're writing about. And so when you have a title, you can have some kind of goofy or whimsical title talk. I almost wrote it as talking titles, which would be just maybe cross over from the border from whimsy to just stupid. So I said title talk using YouTube. So this is like you can also use these here like as a thematic, like as something thematic or something like informal. You get the sense from title talk that it's kind of informal, and this is informal. But then here's something more sophisticated, something that is quite specific. Using YouTube, which is what we are all doing right now, we are using YouTube to explore the language and syntax. Because I'm focused on this colon right here, that's an element of syntax. And so I'm also letting whoever is, would be judging this performance based on the title, whether or not I know what it is that I'm talking about. And other facets of this video, I'll talk about language a little bit. But yeah, it's academic titles, the kind of things that you would use for a research paper, those big papers for AP or IB. So tonal contrast can be something precise and clear with something more whimsical, clever, creative, and most importantly, inviting. The first impression of your paper is that title. So does your title hit? Does it connect? And you'll see some titles I'm going to show you that are that I think do that fairly well. Another thing you can do in your title is have, like, let's say you're doing a literary analysis. You can have on one side of the colon the name of the work, just simply the name of the work, and then on the other side, an investigation of, or an analysis of, or exploring the use of something in whatever. Point number one pretty much is made, and then you'll see examples of that as we move through. We've got tonal contrast, we've got that right there. So academic writing is a genre. So like, here's the question. It's a question. Should I hyphenate here? Is it always hyphenated? Probably. Would you write a science fiction novel without ever having read a science fiction novel? You have to learn the rules of the road. And that's this next part where I'm going to just introduce a bunch of titles, maybe talk about them, maybe talk about these key features and how they work. These are the kind of things, if you got a teacher, professor, and they care about what it is that they're doing, they probably read this a lot. I know I do, because it's totally fascinating. So as I'm teaching a work to a group of students, I'm going to do my own research so that I can help them understand, and I can help myself. I'm always learning more about the things that I'm trying to teach people. So here is a title of an academic paper that's, this is 20 pages long, but it has a colon. Chaucer's Pardoner, His Sexuality and Modern Critics. So you can tell that before the colon, we have the work and a specific character in the work. So there's an idea that you could use. If you're just focusing on a single character in a work, if you're doing like colorless Suzuki Tsukuru, you could do something like Tsukuru's pain or Tsukuru's emotional experience, colon, and then some kind of examination of that. So that's the first one. Second one, here's a little whimsy. Here's a little creativity. Here's a little, a little something that's designed to draw you into the paper. A Romance to Kill For. Homicidal complicity in Faulkner's A Rose for Emily. And so syntactically, you have to have this is like a noun. Homicidal complicity in Faulkner's A Rose for Emily, A Romance to Kill For. And you notice they could have had it either way. I always think of a colon when it's used this way. It's really like a seesaw. Like a seesaw, you got like a you got like a balance point right here, and here's a kid right here, seesaw, here's a person right here. And the colon is wow, I'm sure this is extremely illuminating for people. It's like the fulcrum on that seesaw, so that what's on both sides of the colon are balanced. It invites balance. A Romance to Kill For, homicidal complicity in. Okay, moving on to my next title. Here's one where the author, and this happens to be Zadie Smith, so it's brilliant, I love it, but Brief Interviews with Hideous Men. This is the title of a work by David Foster Wallace. But she's used his title as what's on one side of the teeter-totter for her title with a colon in between, and then the difficult gifts of David Foster Wallace. This phrase, difficult gifts, is really something that she uses as a metaphor throughout her essay to understand what her perception, it's her lens that she investigates this particular work, which is a collection of short stories. Moving along. These are also interesting. I hope they're interesting to me. Reframing Metamorphoses, the enabling of political allegory in late medieval Ovidian narrative. This happens to be a dissertation. But the idea is that you can tell from this reframing. So this is looking at Metamorphoses, Ovid's poem, from trying to re-understand how to frame it, how to understand it, how to look at it. The enabling of political, and so political allegory is the framework from which this writer is going to be looking at Ovidian narrative from in the late medieval, from a late medieval perspective. Here's one without a colon, but it does have a question mark. So question marks can act like colons. What is or was postmodern fiction? Murakami after Borges. The Other Worlds of the Mind. So The Other Worlds of the Mind is another one of those, it's kind of dynamic, it's interesting, it's creative, and it's probably a borrowing of some of Ursula K. Le Guin's language, but the colon and then loci of resistance in Ursula K. Le Guin's the word for world is forest and voices. So what is this writer interested in? Resistance, acts of resistance, which is a totally interesting thing to write about. If you're going to write an essay, what a great thing to write about. Binary opposition, chronology of time and female identity in William Faulkner's A Rose for Emily. So this one does not have a colon, so you don't have to have a colon, but you do have very clear statements of things that are really like nouns. Binary opposition in William Faulkner's A Rose for Emily. And if you want me to do another video on this that looks even deeper, I just never know how deep to go. Sometimes I just go way too deep. But if you wanted me to do another one, if people people, wanted me to do it in the comments. I can do that. But it really is something like you have to have like a noun concept, like a binary opposition is like I know what that is. That means you have two forces that are opposed that are, like black and white are binary opposition. Chronology of time, that's like a known thing. And then female identity. So each one of these things is a noun. They're quite specific. Sometimes they have specific adjectives that modify them in some way. But like, I know what opposition is, I know what time is, I know what identity is, and this author is very clearly telling me that in this particular analysis of A Rose for Emily by William Faulkner, that is where the investigation is going to take place. What is binary opposition in William Faulkner's Rose for Emily? How does time operate in that short story? How is female identity expressed? So those are the obvious lines of inquiry. Those are the obvious questions that are driving this analysis, which is totally interesting because I read it. A stylistic analysis of complexity in William Faulkner's A Rose for Emily. So if you're writing like an HL essay for an IB class, or maybe you're in college and you're just really interested in a work, a stylistic analysis of complexity, which means this writer is going to be investigating, really whatever he wants or she wants from Tikrit University in Iraq. Whatever aspects of that story were particularly rich, inviting, confusing, complex in interesting ways, that's what's going to be examined. The Patriarch's Balls. Class, consciousness, violence, and dystopia in George Saunders' vision of contemporary America. Well, Juliana Naliero from the University of Valladolid. Obviously, you are awesome because anybody who would try to publish about George Saunders, it's almost like the coolest writers. If you're going to examine the coolest writer, you better be pretty cool yourself, and you better have a cool title. And this certainly does, with a very whimsical use of of a colon, and then obviously like very specific and detailed on this side of the colon. Very, I'm not sure exactly what sense, but it does make me want to read the paper for sure. Here's another one. Colon, shifting traditions. So like, I know what a tradition is. It's a noun. Also, a lot of times there's gerunds here at the beginning that are kind of like, what are you doing? What are you examining? I am examining shifting traditions. Chaucer's narrative accomplishment and The Wife of Bath's tale considered in the context of the shift from oral tradition to literate print tradition. I read this. Totally fascinating. Totally interesting. This is quite old. Some features of Ovid's style. Personification of abstractions. So that's a fair game. I think that's the last one that I have. So that's basically it for this video. Kind of short. If you're interested in like a deeper analysis of how titles can go, let me know. If you enjoyed it, watched it all, it helped you, give me a like, comment, subscribe, all that. Have a good one.